Hunting season in Michigan is underway, and while this beloved pastime usually is undertaken in the Upper Peninsula or the Lower Peninsula as well, close to home in Greater West Bloomfield, we're seeing some of those key animals like deer a little bit more often in our backyard. Here for more insight on why that may be the case and what you can do to protect this wildlife and yourself is Jared Duquette from the Michigan Department of Natural Resources, or DNR. Jared, thank you for being with us today.
Absolutely. Thank you. Hello, everybody.
Yeah, glad to have you on with us to talk about this because for many people, they love seeing the deer in their backyard. It's a beautiful reflection of our local native life. But also on the other side of that, there are many people that are maybe concerned about having that much wildlife in their yards for their pets, for their kids, etc. So let's begin with the basics. Why do you believe, or the DNR believe maybe, that these animals are being seen maybe a bit more commonly in domestic areas like Greater West Bloomfield?
Sure, there's several factors involved with that, especially for species like deer that they're very adaptable to people. And a lot of times, and so as you know, we see more development, more subdivisions and things going in that kind of create these little refugia for deer where they normally would be hunted, but now they can't be without ordinance changes. And a lot of people, they're planting great food out there for deer. We hear lots of complaints of, my hostas are being eaten and things, and that's great deer food out there. And so, they have the shelter that they need, they have the food that they need, and they're in a safe place. And so they're allowed to thrive. And we just don't have as many hunters nowadays too across the state to help manage deer. And so a species like deer is doing extremely well.
And so when that is the case, and you mentioned there that a lot of people will enjoy putting food out for these deer, or in this case, they unintentionally do so with the last remnants of those spring and summer gardens. If people are trying to be helpful to these deer and leaving food out, what challenges might that face for the animals themselves and to maybe address this as it becomes in some cases an issue in our communities?
Yeah, there's two big ones when, kind of any animals out there that if we're providing food that they normally wouldn't get in the environment, that often will cluster animals in really high abundances, and you risk actually more spread of diseases that kind of naturally occur in the environment because you have all those animals coming in contact in that location. But also it provides more food than they would normally get. And so these populations, they have more fawns if you're a deer, you have more, chicks if you're a bird, that kind of thing. And so it provides all that nutrition that those populations need to really flourish.
Jared Duquette is with us, Human-Wildlife Interaction Specialist with the Michigan DNR, on today's edition of The Splash Live, as we see a lot more of this natural wildlife in our area interacting with us in our neighborhoods. They're in the woods behind our homes here with so many wetlands and woodlands in Greater West Bloomfield, and especially deer as we're in the deer hunting season through the end of November. Jared, as we look at these animals that are coming through our yards, coming through our neighborhoods and crossing our streets. And that brings up that there are a number of different hazards that they also bring along with them. Of course, on our roads, we have deer going across. That's an obvious hazard there. But what others may they bring forth when they're in our neighborhoods?
Sure. And, what you see, and, you bring up a good point with, we see more and more vehicle collisions with deer, and certainly agencies like MDOT are very concerned with that, amongst others. And, we're very concerned with that too. But, beyond that, we see, there's a lot of these overabundant populations, especially with deer. They're causing a lot of damage to people's ornamental plants, trees, flowers, shrubs, that kind of thing. And beyond that, it's the deer themselves. People often forget that too. Of populations can get so big they actually start to starve over time, or they start to do worse because they start to get themselves out of house and home, or introduce more disease into populations. And so, as the wildlife management agency here in the state, we get very concerned about that when we start to see that all that food and that risk being incurred in some areas.
So then how is that reflected? How is that addressed both from the municipal level locally here in Greater West Bloomfield, and then in collaboration at the county level or with your organization at the state level at the DNR?
Sure, absolutely. And we take a very integrated approach. Of course, traditionally we've relied on with deer anyway, with deer hunters, uh, for example. And so that's one management tool we can use to help kind of manage deer populations. But beyond that, we work very closely with a lot of municipalities across the state, including in Southeast Michigan, and to help them create management plans that are specifically tailored to that community, their needs, their type of zoning ordinances and things, and look at solutions that may be best for them. And so we try to work very collaboratively with municipalities.
And in terms of those individual homeowners here in Greater West Bloomfield, what can they maybe do to keep this wildlife protected and safe, but also
Mhm.
discourage them maybe from being in their yards, on their properties, in our neighborhoods, and back in the more natural areas where they're best fit?
Absolutely. And so, you have species like deer, and we get more turkey complaints
We
actually
do.
nowadays, and things, and Canada geese. And so, animals readily habituate to people, especially if they're being fed. And so, we really discourage and help municipalities hopefully, have ordinances where we don't want people feeding animals because they'll readily habituate. And then, we end up with, instances where we have deer running around with Halloween buckets on their heads and things. And it's bad for people because deer are coming in closer contact with, their plants and things. But it's also bad for the deer potentially, or bad for the turkeys. And so, we're trying to create that balance. So please don't feed the animals. There is enough food out there for them to survive and do well. The other thing too is be proactive in working with your municipality or doing things around your home, like protecting your plants or planting native plants, which tend to be more deer resistant than maybe some you would get from say a nursery, for example.
Yes, and this season we have so many animals that we'll see around our yards as we're observing with our families during the holidays. Great to observe them, a beautiful piece of our nature. But we want to pardon the turkeys, as we do each and every year with the governor, a West Bloomfield resident naming those last year, and let them go to the library, as you're seeing on your screen, and do some reading over at the West Bloomfield Main Library branch, a place they love very much, with the woods right behind there, both the turkeys and the deer. Jared Duquette is with us, human-wildlife interaction specialist with the Michigan DNR, on today's edition of the Splash Live. Jared, before we let you go, any lasting messages for our local residents here in Greater West Bloomfield about how they can best interact and support this native wildlife that's roaming around our community?
Yeah, I think that the main message I always like to tell people is like, help us keep the wild in wildlife. However that is, if not feeding them, we don't want them to become habituated, and especially during fall time when deer are in their breeding period. Slow down, keep your eyes peeled. Those deer are very active this time of year. And as we get into late winter, we have species like coyotes that start to breed, and you're going to hear them howling more and things. They're around, but they're doing a good job of helping control the rodent populations and things that can cause damage too. So just try to live with wildlife the best you can.
Well, Jared, we appreciate your time joining us on today's edition of the program and your insight as we see more of this wildlife interacting with our community each and every day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.